رب العزة عما يصفون.
Most of us have only a few vague and stereotypical notions about this enigmatic country called Turkey. Ideas that we've picked up from rumor, newspapers, romance novels, or Hollywood. You know what I'm talking about. Midnight Express, the Gulf War, the Sultan and his harem, an old man in a fez smoking a hookah pipe. That's Turkey seen from the outside. But for the next hour, we're going to take you on an incredible journey inside Turkey for a glimpse of the real thing. And like most people who take the trip, I think you're going to be amazed and surprised by what you're about to see.
Situated at the edge of Europe, on the borderlands of the Middle East, Turkey's a land of contrasts. Anywhere you look, there's the blending of the old and the new, the traditional and the modern, the Eastern and the Western.
I'm too sexy for your party, too sexy for your party.
Starting thousands of years before the birth of Christ, numerous civilizations from both East and West have washed over this land. Greek, Persian, and Roman. The Turks are just the latest wave from the East. And by recent, we mean 1,000 years, ending up in the 20th century with modern Turkey, a developing country slightly larger than Texas that is making itself known more and more to the Western world.
Turkey's definitely underrated from what we've seen so far.
Well, first of all, it's so varied. You'd find 100 worlds in one continent and one land.
All over the countryside, modern faces and faces that seem from centuries past meet in a friendly and tolerant atmosphere. In cities like Istanbul, the great civilizations of old Byzantium and the Ottoman Empire blend in rough harmony with the present, while the pillars of both Islam and Christianity dot the skyline. But the best way to begin is to forget everything you've heard or believed about this place and just start fresh. And there's no better way to wash away all those old stereotypes than with a nice, hot bath. Ah, yes, just what I need, a real Turkish bath. A beautiful experience in this beautiful marble-lined authentic hammam dating back to the 1400s. Nothing could be more relaxing and more serene than the experience of the sultans, right? I'll just sit back and relax and enjoy it. Oh! Of course, I could be wrong. Ready for anything. Well, after a tea or two. Don't go away.
Exciting, exotic, thrilling.
It's nice, it's special, it's very good, food is great.
And I wanted to come someplace that was decidedly different from, what we're used to. That was, somewhat Western, but also, somewhat Eastern. I think Istanbul was the perfect place.
In most Turkish cities, it's possible to experience the layers of history within a few blocks. But nowhere is the richness of an old culture as apparent as in Istanbul. Skipping over this great city while visiting the country would be like visiting New York and never seeing Manhattan.
Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Been a long time gone, old Constantinople still is Turkish delight on a moonlit night.
Abine gelsin mi? Abine de dondurma verelim.
Istanbul may not be the capital, yet it is the heart of Turkey. This singular city straddles both the continents of Europe and Asia, with the European side split by the historic river known as the Golden Horn.
Istanbul is truly a feast for the eyes, but no sight is more impressive than right here on the Bosporus. Just think of this. On one hand, you have the continent of Asia. On the other hand, the continent of Europe. And they're separated by this strait of water, a mere 5 minutes from one continent to the other. No wonder so many mythological and historical figures have traveled these waters. But it wasn't until the 15th century that the Bosporus became the bottleneck for the Ottoman Turks and their conquest of Constantinople.
When the Byzantine Empire was finally crumbling, the Turks were already at the gate, looking out at the enemy through this fortress on the Bosphorus. In 1453, Constantinople was theirs, renamed Istanbul.
That's nobody's business but the Turks.
Eventually, the Ottoman Empire also reached its end. This Janissary band may now be a mere tourist attraction, yet these somewhat odd-looking costumes and instruments remain the symbols of an old and powerful empire. For almost 3 centuries, the Ottoman sultans ruled from this immense complex called Topkapi, or Cannon Gate. At the height of their reign, all of the Middle East, North Africa, and half of Eastern Europe was under their reign. Today, priceless jewels like this 86-carat spoon diamond, the notorious harem section, and all the special pavilions where the Sultan and family entertain guests are now part of the Topkapi Palace Museum.
As you walk along these grand pavilions, you can really feel what it must have been like to live the opulent lifestyle of a sultan. One sultan used to stand on this pavilion here and throw pearls from the balcony. Me, I'll just throw a coin.
For most of Ottoman history, the sultans could well afford to waste their coins. They also spent them generously in the building of masterpieces, such as the Blue Mosque. Built on a whim by Sultan Ahmed, this Ottoman work of art is the only one in Turkey with 6 minarets. A total of 21,043 blue tiles decorate the inside walls. Each of these tiles cost 18 akses in Ottoman times, more than the daily wage of a palace schoolteacher. If the rush of history and the streets become too much for you, you can sip your tea and take it all in from a distance on an old Istanbul ferry. And if you really want to get away from it all, you can take your ferry out here to the Princess Islands, where the pace is slower and the air exhaust-free. Cars are forbidden on these islands, and if you can spend an afternoon enjoying a ride through the pine groves, make sure you know your ferry times back to the city. Because if you catch the right moment, the sunset will transport you back to a time when men of a different century fought hard for the love of this city called Istanbul.
I'd say don't go to the Mediterranean because it's all the same.
Yeah.
Go to Turkey because you've got everything you want there.
In the morning you can do like this, the ancient cities, and in the afternoon you can go to beaches or somewhere else.
The stretch of golden coast from Marmaris to Antalya forms the western portion of Turkey's corner of the Mediterranean. These rough hills and clear waters were fertile terrain for the growth of ancient civilizations. The Greek and Roman cities that dotted these coasts, rich in trade culture and the seafaring tradition, are the very places where Western civilization bloomed. In those days, Antony and Cleopatra frolicked in baths and on beaches. They had the right idea. And Alexander the Great marched his army waist-deep in water along the shore. This is why they call it the Blue Voyage. These yacht trips that have become the hallmark of the Turkish coast. You can find more shades of blue and green water along here than just about anywhere. And that's why in recent years, so many tourists are traveling beyond the familiar haunts of Spain, Italy, and Greece to discover the riches of this magnificent coast, just as the ancients once did.
What do you do on a blue voyage? Sit in the sun, go swimming, drink beer. What else do you want on a holiday?
It's nice to relax every day. You've all the time in the world to do it.
The Blue Voyage started as a rare and offbeat excursion in a small sponge diver's boat. Today it's evolved into a journey in luxurious goulettes, locally built yachts modeled after ancient Phoenician design.
Oh, yes.
When we hear the word yacht, we tend to think of millionaires and very expensive vacations, but not on the Turkish coast.
Do you have to be rich to go on a blue voyage and live like a king like this?
No, not really. No, considering what you do, 2 weeks on board a luxury boat like this, yacht like this, and nothing to do, it's lovely.
What would you say to the Yanks in America about this place?
Well, I don't understand why you haven't found it yet. Yeah. You're usually quite smart with everything else.
It's going to take us about an hour to get to the mud bath. Going out into the sea, round past Turtle Beach.
As if sun and sea weren't enough, the Blue Voyage is more than just a boating tour. It's a casual encounter with the past at every turn.
Halfway between Marmaris and Antalya is the beautiful beach of Patara. Legend has it that St. Nicholas was born here. Can you imagine jolly old St. Nick at the beach here? Well, that's a happy footnote to this area and its history, where at one time the Lycians predominated. They had a hauntingly beautiful obsession with death. The Lycians were an independent-minded people, known for the fierce way they defended their land, as well as the legacy of solid craftsmanship they applied to the honoring of their dead. In the small town of Kaş, a huge Lycian sarcophagi now sits idly in the middle of the shopping area. In the Bay of Kekava, Lycian tombs still stand, half submerged in the sea. And in Dalyan, an added adventure in a small tour boat is required to experience the true height of Lycian resourcefulness and design. The half-hour ride through a long and winding marsh is well worth the trip. Just when you're tired of waiting, they will appear. These masterpieces of ancient engineering carved into the dramatic cliffs, the Lycian tombs from thousands of years ago. It's said that modern tools cannot easily copy the Lycian ingenuity. Not that anyone has tried. Today's technology is used for making the coast into a first-class resort heaven, and succeeding at it, too. The old-timers here remember the days when visiting these shores meant sleeping in tents. But today, many of the former fishing villages here have become boom towns of tourism. Take Marmaris. Today, Marmaris is #1 in yacht chartering and home to the Golden Dolphin, a 5-star resort nestled in a stretch of pine forest. Then there are the 3 Ks of the coast: Kaş, Kalkan, and Kekava. The first 2 are tourist gems wedged between the mountains and the sea. The third is Kekava Bay, surrounded by the charm and simplicity of villages like Uchos.
5 years of school?
Yes.
Now you're finished?
Yes.
And you're 13?
Yes.
Are you ready to get married now?
No.
No. When are you going to get married?
25.
25? Do you have a boy?
No.
No.
Are you looking for one? Looking?
No.
No?
The last big stop on the coast is Antalya. Turkey's 15th largest city and the center of old Pamphylia. That meant land of all tribes in ancient Greek. This melting pot tradition continues with an international mix of locals and tourists. The city itself shows more than one face. First, there's the tourist trade, catering in sites such as the famous fluted minaret, Hadrian's Gate, and various antiquities all within an hour's drive. But then there's the other, more traditional side, and that's found just a few steps from downtown, behind the old Roman walls. That's the other Antalya, the one that doesn't always make it to the postcards. This traditional side is also being replaced with the modern in other big resort towns, like Bodrum to the west in the South Aegean. Who would have guessed, traveling out of the edge of Europe at the frontiers of the Middle East, one would find a veritable Turkish Saint-Tropez, visited by the likes of Barbara Streisand, Dustin Hoffman, and Mick Jagger. This is Bodrum, a town as devoted to the hedonistic pleasures of sun and romance as you'll find anywhere in the West.
Come on. Hi. Come on, everybody. Eat something here. Hey, you will never forget this meal if you eat. Okay?
A Turkish writer was once exiled here for his unorthodox political views. But what an exile! He made the town famous with his stories and launched its reputation as a haven for artists and the like.
First I measure. You measure finish, ladder. Ladder finish, sandalet. You understand?
No visit to Bodrum would be complete without a trip to Ali Güven's sandal shop. He's been here since 1966, measuring, designing, and fitting for many a foot.
Across the harbor there is the castle of St. Peter. It has actively defended Bodrum all the way up until World War I. And that's quite impressive when you consider that castle was built in 1402 by the Knights of St. John. But these days, Bodrum's known for a different kind of night. A sexy, romantic, party-going night that keeps the international jet set entertained all the way till dawn.
We have punks, we have transsexuals, we have gays, we have everybody here. We plan everything according to an international public. So our guests, 50% Turkish, 50% foreigners. So we want to satisfy all of them.
An open-air disco with Greek columns, a laser show with blasting Western music, and a 15th century castle with the silent moon above. Nothing could be more fitting for the Turkish Riviera. More than anything, Anatolia is a land of layers, going down into the earth and back in time. From ancient Ephesus on the west coast, to Mount Nimrod in the east, to Aspendos in the south. It is, and has always been, a swinging door of mankind's marches through time. The kingdom of Commagene might have been a mere footnote in history, except for the extraordinary ego of its self-styled ruler, Antiochus I. The tiny kingdom held a precarious balance for a brief moment in history between the advances of Rome and the ambitions of Parthia, and it might have just faded into the pages of history if it were not for Mount Nimrod.
Just fantastic. Words can't really describe it.
How in the world did they get all this rock up here in the first place?
I'd say it's the experience of a lifetime.
Here you are on top of the world, 7,000 feet above central Turkey, on the top of Mount Nimrod, where 2,000 years ago, Antiochus I built this tomb. There's an inscription here that proclaims this place will stand forever. And of course, erosion and earthquakes have taken their toll, and some of the heads have fallen from their perches. But even now, 2,000 years later, I don't think there's a place as impressive as this anywhere in the world.
Antiochus thought it appropriate to deify himself in the company of massive statues of his favorite gods. Here's Zeus in all his glory. To the left is the aesthetic-looking Apollo, and to the right is Heracles. Now don't forget the only lady, goddess Tyche, and looking completely at home in such company, Antiochus I. Walking along this terrace is like moving around on a giant chessboard, and these heads, the chess pieces of the gods. Watching it all from the best seat in the house. The classical theaters in general are the most common sight among Turkey's antiquities. These were more than just the places where citizens went to see plays. This was their television, their movie theater, their rock stadium, their town square, their soapbox and voting center. The theaters were the focus point of leisure and celebration and public life during the time.
You'll find Greek and Roman theaters all over Turkey, but this 2nd century theater at Aspendos is the best preserved in the entire world. In fact, they still put on plays and shows right here. It was meticulously designed so that the acoustics are impeccable. Even the people all the way up there in the back row could hear every word.
The architect was Zenon. His secret formula for the acoustics is yet to be discovered, but some theorize it was the shape of these balconies and the curve of the seats that did the trick. Inspired by the wonderful sense of space opening up to the sky, you might find it hard to resist testing the acoustics with your own spontaneous performance. At the peninsula town of Side, the ancient theater tradition lives on in another way. Today they're preparing for a concert. While Western music blasts from the speakers, souvenir displays rest on ancient columns. Further west, on the Aegean coast, another theater sits quietly, carved into the slopes of Mount Pion. This was home to ancient reveries to Artemis, the fertility goddess, and later to the preachings of St. Paul. It belonged to one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, what once was described as the first and greatest metropolis of Asia, Ephesus.
Rome has the Colosseum, Athens has the Parthenon, but Turkey has an entire city from antiquity, the city of Ephesus. Every year, thousands of people come here to see the ruins. But it's not the people who come here every year that give this place its importance. It's the people who used to live here. At one time, Ephesus had over 200,000 residents.
This was downtown Ephesus, with private houses to the right and public buildings to the left. It was the heart of the city, and legend has it that water flowed freely down the middle. Walking down this colonnaded path known as Harbor Street, you can't help trying to imagine this bustling city. Time hasn't treated all parts of the city equally. While the Temple of Hadrian still catches the eye with a graceful arch and facade, only the globe and a huge foot is left of the Fountain of Trajan. But the most impressive single building in Ephesus is the Library of Celsus. It's the best preserved structure of its kind in all the world. The ancient Greeks may have enjoyed their books, but legend has it that there's a secret pathway that led down from the library straight to the brothels. A little far-fetched, you say? Well, that's all right. After all, a tale is told in every corner of Turkey. And as you travel, you might wonder whether the story is a wild comedy or a grand tragedy. It's probably some of both. This never-ending human drama, watched ever so closely by the gods on Mount Nimrod.
Everyone likes leather jackets and carpets and what have you. And I can afford to travel to Turkey without any problems whatsoever.
In Turkey you can get very much value for the money you spend here.
So high quality and low prices, that's got to be a winning combination.
Yes, that's why we are so big.
Yes, shopping is big in Turkey. It would be very hard to come here and resist the temptation to buy anything, from leather to lavender, not to mention food. Food is so plentiful and so cheap. First comes seafood. Consider that Turkey is surrounded by water on 3 sides. And how about this whole street full of sizzling kebab stands? And for you vegetarians, beautiful fruit markets overflowing with fruit. At markets like this, you can see why Turkey is one of the few countries in the world that can feed itself.
1,5 kilo. Böyle bir demet şey yapıyor. Demet işi bunlar böyle 3.000 lira.
And if you're in the mood for something more exotic, take a stroll through Istanbul's Egyptian market, where touching, smelling, and tasting are all free of charge, not to mention the bonus entertainment. This market is full of smells we don't even have words for. It was originally built as a spice bazaar in the 1600s, when most of its goods came from the banks of the Nile, and every spice had its special medieval powers, like cumin for meanness, thyme for strength, basil for cursing, or rosemary for remembrance.
It may not be like the old days when they used to sell donkeys' milk and gunpowder, but these days Istanbul's Egyptian market still has some of the most exotic and colorful bargains around. Everything from Turkish delight to the rarest of spices. You can even sample the Sultan's raisins. Delicious.
If you've been imagining that some guy in New Jersey invented the modern mall, then you have to come to Turkey. Mazes of shops and markets seem to crop up everywhere you go, making this a shopper's paradise. But you can't escape history in Turkey even while shopping. Turkish markets owe their richness not just to the more recent boom in manufacturing, but to traditions of centuries-old craftsmanship that are still alive in the heartland of Turkey. The famous Greek theateress Bendos gives its name to this jewelry complex on the Mediterranean coast and proudly displays antique instruments for gold setting. These women practice a trade unique to the Black Sea region. Hasır it's called. Beautiful bracelets made by interweaving incredibly fine golden threads. It takes them about a week to make one bracelet, and they make 80 to 100,000 Turkish lira on it. Well, that's not even $20. And these small works of art may end up in displays like this one, selling for more than $700 each. Craftsmanship is still very cheap in Turkey, and that's one reason why the bargains are so good. And yet, profit is not all that drives the craftsmen of Turkey. Here, in a rug shop in Middle Anatolia, a young man repairs an antique rug nearly 80 years old, and young women work on patterns that go back to the Selçuk Turks. That's 300 years before the Ottomans. In the Turks' nomadic past, every tribe had its patterns and symbols that continued even after settling down. Back then, village girls loomed carpets as part of their dowry and knotted tassels in such a way to tell the world they were ready for a husband. Well, times may change, but here in the middle of Turkey, some things stay the same for centuries. Some of these rugs serve as decorations among the volcanic rocks known as the fairy chimneys, but you'll hear more about that later. We're interested in the majority of rugs that eventually make their way to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, where we are headed for the quintessential Turkish buy, a carpet. The famous covered bazaar in Istanbul takes in centuries of sprawling growth in the typically Eastern way. Now, if you want to make it through here, you're going to have to learn a few shopping rituals. Don't look any merchant in the eye for longer than a second if you don't want to hear an aggressive sales pitch in any one of his 5 languages. Don't buy the first thing you like. There are probably 100 of them right around the corner for half the price. And if you're ready to buy, at least try to bargain. Here, it's more than a ritual. It's a requirement.
¿Dónde está? Dos. Por favor, más momento. Uno, más de esta. Por favor.
The historic bazaar is one of the biggest in the world. Over 4,000 shops are interspersed within a maze of tiny streets and alleys. 1 in every 4 stores in the bazaar is a rug shop. So just pick one and let the show begin. You may call it salesmanship, but nearly all rug dealers will tell you every rug is unique. And that's partly true, since so many rugs have so many distinct qualities. The ones with the round middle motif are called medallion and denote the power of the Sultan. The ones more floral in character are Persian-inspired, while carpets with more niches in the design show Egyptian influence. And last but not least, the gems from the town of Haraka. Special Turkish carpets, 100% silk.
This is something that you'll keep for the rest of your life and your grandchildren.
Yes, because something like that has 100 knots per square centimeters, and supposing that this is about 2.5, something like that, 2,500 knots in this carpet.
But can I just between you and me, for $8,000, I'd be afraid to walk on this with my cowboy boots.
If you want to get a good bargain, just know what you're looking for, and remember, you can't go wrong. Any carpet you buy here will probably cost at least half of what it would cost in the United States. But the bazaar doesn't end here. If you go to the streets outside, you'll find a sprawling, wonderfully haphazard crush of bargains, more on the black market side of cheap. And who knows, someday this lively chaos may be covered too, quietly absorbed into the official bazaar in that typically Eastern way. Glorious ancient cities like Ephesus contributed more than just the marble columns and statues we see today. A less visible but equally grand culture also had its start here. Christianity. Well-preserved Christian sites are everywhere in this Muslim country, from Cappadocia in the east to Ephesus in the west. St. Paul first came here to Ephesus in the year 53 AD. His greatest rivals were not so much the local worshippers of the popular fertility goddess Artemis, but the local merchants who were doing big business in small statues of the well-endowed fertility goddess. Some things never change. The merchants staged a rally in this amphitheater, and St. Paul was forced to flee. Eventually, St. Paul did win over his audience, establishing a church at Ephesus, along with 2 others in Anatolia, with many of Christianity's sacred rites adopted from local customs. Ephesus is also the place where the Virgin Mary came to spend her last days with St. John. The Church of the Virgin Mary can be found across the road and in the south of the ancient site. So it is possible that someday they may find the tomb of the Virgin Mary somewhere back here in these hills?
Yes, why not? Yeah, just as we have found the house, someday we may find the tomb.
The tomb of the Virgin Mary?
Yes.
It might be here.
Might be here.
Among these hills?
Yes, at the back of the house.
Following the steps of St. Paul also brings us to Middle Anatolia, to the once kingdom of Cappadocia. Millions of years before St. Paul ever set foot here, volcanic eruptions covered this land with thick layers of volcanic ash. Another 1,000,000 years turned Cappadocia into a dreamlike landscape inhabited by settlers as early as the Hittites. For the locals, these volcanic formations, commonly known as fairy chimneys, were the perfect place to hide from the steady traffic of conquerors passing both east and west. For centuries, the cave dwellers here resisted the dominating influence of any one culture until the coming of St. Paul. This malleable land with its shamanistic culture proved to be fertile ground for Christianity and for the talents of its craftsmen. Today, nearly 2,000 years later, Turkish ingenuity has turned some of these caves into hotels, restaurants, and other tourist attractions. This cave studio provides just the right temperature for the pottery work of artist Galip from Avanos.
Eski ustalar toprağın karakterine göre
The old masters deliberately chose these caves here because the soil dries slowly. If it were in any other environment, like a regular apartment, it would dry up real fast and cause breakage.
Buralarda çabuk kuruyacaktır ve çatlayacaktır.
In their zeal for elevation, the early Christians also sought retreat in the steep coastal mountains of the Black Sea. The road up to the Samila Monastery is long and steep. Still, it's a treat for the eyes. The dark forests are greener and lusher here than anywhere else in Turkey. For centuries, desert people fled their dry lands for these rich forests, and they, in turn, forced the Christians up to the mountains.
Çok detaylı, çok artistik bir yapı teknolojisi
They didn't use a very artistic or detailed technology here. Everything was local, wherever they could get stones and have them carried by animals in 5-6 hours times at the most. That's what they did.
Bölgelerin taşları seçilmiş ve onlar kullanılmış.
The ravages of time and a big fire have left their mark on Sumela. Today, the Turkish government and a team of architects are trying to recreate this piece of history, little known to the rest of the world. In the end, Rome was conquered when it declared Christianity the state religion in 313 and moved its capital to Constantinople, thus launching the Byzantine Empire. Historians and poets alike have declared Byzantium the perfect combination of the universal empire and the universal church. Many believe this balance reached the height of its glory in the creation of the great church, the Santa Sofia in Istanbul. The sense of vast space, especially the huge dome yet to be equaled anywhere in the world, makes Saint Sophia a true masterpiece. No wonder most visitors can't stop looking up and up and up. Through centuries of decay and invasions, the great Christian empire eventually came to its end. Still, these sacred places do not lose their power so easily, and the fragments of an old fresco or the corner of a church archway, the roots of Christianity in Turkey, may well stand for another 2,000 years. Turkey's versatile landscape offers a patchwork of choices for all kinds of travelers. If there's one place where this is especially true, it must be the Cotton Castle. People from all walks and from all over the world come here to experience one single sensation.
The water is incredibly soft. It's like going into silk.
In all the world, I don't see a place like this, so it's something amazing. It's terrific.
Icing sugar.
This shimmering white plateau is nothing more than the result of limestone-rich waters from nearby thermal springs. Now, some believe the waters in these shallow pools have healing powers. No one really knows why. What is well known is that anybody and everybody comes here, from the local women who cover their hair to the tourists who cover as little as possible. The warm springs of Pamukkale, like Turkey itself, form one big melting pot. You may wonder, how does a country 90% Muslim condone topless bathers and women who smoke? Or, more simply, how can age-old traditions from the East mingle so freely with the new ways of the West? Well, they don't. They simply coexist with a good measure of tolerance, all in one land. This is Taşköprü, a small agricultural community in northern Turkey where tradition still hangs on, like their famous kuyu kebab, for instance, the old way of cooking 10 whole lambs at once in a kuyu, or quite literally in a well. And during this annual folk festival here, don't expect the Mardi Gras, not even the hubbub of a street fair here. Entertainment is for politely watching, not reveling. Young men and women perform regional dances from all over Turkey. This one's from the south. Now, the colors are vivid and the steps are lively. But the crowd is subdued. The performers may sing and dance, but the public prefers the sidelines. Taşköprü's festival is mostly a spectator sport. Then comes the grand finale from another time and place.
Altta kaldım diye üzülme, üste çıktım diye sevinme.
Don't despair if you lose, and don't celebrate if you're on top. That's what the announcer's saying. The moral of the story is this: watch out, because victory is slippery. In this case, so is the victor. Welcome to grease wrestling, the Turkish tradition of swabbing yourself with oil and trying to flip over an equally slippery opponent. Why do you wrestle?
We really like this. We've been doing it for 11, 12 years and just keep going. It's a tradition that comes down from family.
Yes, there is money to be made in grease wrestling, especially if you're in the champion category. But most of these young men have come to Taşköprü as amateurs to try out their luck and to keep up with an ancient sport. Is it important to you whether you win or whether you lose a match?
We do this as a sport. Winning or losing, it's all part of the game.
But winning is more fun, of course.
Legend has it that in Ottoman times, 40 champions were invited from all over the empire to wrestle for the greater glory of God and the Sultan. By dawn the next day, only 2 champions were left out in the field, still on their feet, but locked in a motionless death embrace. But that's only a legend, and this is real. Today's small-town grease wrestling in Turkey, where many a small-town boy gets to have his day in the sun, even for a brief moment. When most residents are respectfully turning in for the night in Taşköprü, a wilder nightlife is just beginning in Istanbul. If you'd like to catch the typical tourist attraction, the belly dancer in action, just pick any nightclub and watch these talented women shake their hearts out, or their bellies, or any other part you wish to mention. And if you've had enough shaking and shimmering in one night, make a stop in the neighborhood of Kumkapı, a choice destination for tourists who want to savor the local flavor. Most people come here for the famous fish restaurants, but there's much more to Kumkapı than just eating. Here, anything goes. You feel like dancing while you're sitting down? Go right ahead. You want to do a jazz number on a totally Turkish instrument? That's okay. And if you're really in the mood, try some of your own belly dancing with one of the local gypsy women. No, not your kind of thing? Well, then sit back, enjoy your fish dinner, and reflect on the unfathomable richness of life. And don't forget your Rocky. That's the national drink with a heavy flavor of anisette that Americans either love or hate. Here, in the land of contrasts, nothing can be too extravagant, too subdued, or too different. This is how it is now, and how it always has been. This mad mix, held together with tolerance, a dose of pleasure, and a great passion for the spoils of good living in this rich crossroads of the world.